I'm going to eat this chocolate.
Yeah, he's going to eat the chocolate. So welcome everybody to the Seeking Integrity, the Sex and Relationship Healing.com webinar. Dr. Rob is finishing a delicious looking chocolate. So I'm going to tell you a little bit. We're both in Florida for a conference. Fall and spring are conference season. So we were both at a conference in California last week, and now we're at a conference in Florida, and then we're both going to St. Louis for a conference, and there's more after that. So we've got road trips and working on connecting with a lot of people. Dr. Rob is sharing the Prodependence presentation to many of the professional colleagues, which is a great message for people to understand. And
Good one.
People are interested in it, and I think they're aligning with it. So that's awesome for us. So
let me tell them, and for those who don't have quite get it, or maybe just you showed up and you don't even know why you're here. My name is Dr. Rob Weiss. I'm an educator and a therapist in the area of sexual disorders, intimacy disorders, sex addiction, the co-occurring issues of drugs and sex, alcohol and sex, most of those issues when they cross together, intimacy, sexuality, relationships, and addiction. And I've been doing this work for about 25 years, and Tammy has been a colleague for a very long time. And I asked her if she would volunteer with me to sit here once a week and just answer questions for you guys, whether it has to do with sex addiction, love addiction, relationship repair, whether you're dealing with maybe a cheating situation, infidelity, or there's a challenge that a couple's having working it out. If you're looking to figure out, what is this problem and do I really have it? And could this really be a real thing? And yes, we can talk to you about all that. So we volunteer our time once a week. Sometimes the patients who we're working with are here on the call. Sometimes it's just you folks who are out there visiting. We never know. You are completely confidential here. We don't see you. We can't really see your name. So anything you ask is really up to you. Line up in the QA and ask questions. May I say, in the meantime, right before we get a question, I see this one coming up. I want to say that we've been I feel really proud of us, Tammy, not just you and me, but the people we work with at Seeking Integrity, because we have a really hit. Someone gonna no one hits on Tammy in the lobby. It's not okay. They're not hitting on you. Okay.
We're just walking by. So yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you. Yeah. We have I would call a really, really popular podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And we have ended up becoming a top 20 addiction podcast in the United States.
No, a top 20 podcast.
We have over 50 shows made up. And by the way, that costs nothing. And this time costs nothing. And as I remind anyone who joins us, back in the day when I wanted to talk to some of the leaders in the field of addiction and recovery, I had to go to a seminar or read a book or maybe see a therapist that they were working with or training. But today you can sit here and ask me anything. And I think that's an incredible gift. And I hope that you are able to take advantage of it, because there's no charge. There's no fee. It's completely confidential. We can help you figure some things out that you may not have known how. And if we don't know how, we can at least point you in the right direction. So I see questions are coming up. Note, yes, Tammy, that as I have aged, I've learned that I forget things in the middle now. So I've brought a pen, and this means I'll write things down. So I won't have to bug you so much about what was that question?
It's all good. But somebody in my very early recovery said the shortest pencil's better than the longest memory. And I actually remembered that saying because it just reminded me that I need to write things down. And I've held on to that. Now, of course, I can type it in a message and text myself and all of that. But it nevertheless is, I need to write things down. So I'm with you. First question, how likely is an innocent appearing sports relationship between a love sex addict and playing partner who see each other 15 hours a week to morph into a full-blown affair if the addict has repeated inappropriate relationships but is now truly actively taking very good steps in recovery? What qualifies as cheating? So there's several parts to that one.
Okay, so to me this would be a trick question. And I'll tell you folks why. There's 19 of you here, and some of you know, and this is not in any way to insult the questioner, because I would ask it too. But this is a little trick in this question, because if I answer it in a particular way, it gives this person the opportunity to go after their spouse and say, well, Rob said. So let me just say that I don't know you, I don't know your husband, I don't know the nature of his work, whether he has to interact with people in a sports like, all of that. But I do know that certainly in the first year or so of recovery, that spouses, partners, male and female, have a really legitimate time trusting and growing trust. And so if I was an addict and I wanted my wife or husband to begin to trust me again, and I was doing good work in recovery, I would avoid situations that might lead them to feeling mistrusting of me, not even because I was doing anything, but because I wanted my spouse to feel safe. I already know as a sex addict that if, let's say I'm a physical trainer and my spouse knows I'm now doing physical training with this incredibly fit, gorgeous 23-year-old who's single and thinks I'm hot, I would then say, I'm going to let someone else train them. Not because I'm so worried about testing my vulnerability, but because I want to tell my spouse a message, which is I'm not going to take this person on because I know that it would not be putting our relationship first. And so I'm going to let somebody else work with this client or whatever and take the next person, not because I'm so worried about slipping, but because I want to make you comfortable. So I think that would be a good approach for a husband to take. And that's the one I would recommend.
I would like you to answer the piece too about what qualifies as cheating.
Well, that's also a trick question.
I know.
So I'll tell you what qualifies as cheating in my book. And I know you spouses will love this, but it's true. And it isn't really good it's not really good therapeutically, but I'll say it anyway. I consider cheating anything that my husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend or sponsor would see me doing, and I wouldn't want them to see. In other words, if there's my spouse should be able to see every single activity I have with other people. And if there's anything I do in any of my interactions with someone that might make my spouse uncomfortable, then I have to question, why am I acting that way if they were with me? So the way I think about it is, and I tell addicts this, if your wife or husband were with you at Starbucks when you were talking to that person, when that housekeeper you didn't know was flirting with you at the party, when you run into that situation, how do you handle it? And what are they experiencing in you? So Tammy, did I answer that?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job. And I wanted to chime in a little bit too. It's like, for me as a person in recovery, I had to make sure that I was setting myself up. I love what you're saying about the appearance of, and I want to make sure that I'm supporting it. But I also, I just don't need to mentally go there. If something's a struggle for me, I made sure I was in safe situations. So I wouldn't be just with one other person. That would be a problem. I would be making sure I was in a group and, whatever. And there would be a contained interaction. So if I really have to stay with this person, then there's a lot more people and there's a lot more. And so it's really obvious to anybody looking that there's nothing going on. So,
and I do want to say that I think addicts can be very tone deaf, especially men, when we want to prove that we can do something. So I'll be like, I'll say to you, I'm not interested in her. I don't care how attractive she is. And it's like, I'm going to tough that one out to prove to myself and you that I can handle it. But meanwhile, I'm actually more uncomfortable than I'm admitting to, and you're horrified. So it's like, maybe I should get off my, wagon and just let someone else work with that person.
Yeah. It's like the drunk that goes to the bar and goes I'm going to sit here and just prove to myself that I can not drink.
Not drink.
Yeah. Well, big deal.
Go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next question. Hi, Dr. Rob. I asked a question a few weeks ago about how no one in my support group contacted me to ask where I am. You answered that I needed to reach out and ask for contact. My main issue is that I didn't feel wanted by a support group. If they don't care, then who would? And then it's kind of a continuation. Do people typically reach out for themselves or do they get reached out to? I'm not quite sure what's normal. How do normal people initiate anything? I always thought if you wanted me to call, then you would have called me too.
Well, this is a great question because I grew up in a family that was like this. My mother would get on the phone. My mother would say, someone would mention someone in the family, like an aunt or a sister or something. And my mother would say, well, if she doesn't call me, I'm not going to call her. I remember hearing that a lot in childhood, a lot about, well, it's up to them to show up first, or they have to, and I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but it is something I learned in life that I don't think is actually true. There are a lot of people in the world for people to hang out with and make friends with. And if it isn't you, they're going to move on to someone else. And it's not because they're not interested in you or they don't like you. It's just because you didn't show up and someone else did. So, and if the person you show up with isn't someone you're hanging out with and having fun with, you got to keep showing up with different people until you find the people that you want to be with. And then you have to keep showing up. I want to support the answer I gave you before. And it's the same answer in a different form. You have to keep, it is my responsibility to maintain and actively engage my relationships. And if they start to move away from me, it's not my job to say, well, when am I going to hear from that person? If I don't hear from them, then they must not care, because that's me sitting alone while they're out having fun because they're with somebody else. And no, they may not be thinking of me all the time, but they might if I called them. So there is a line between injecting ourselves into others' lives in a way that's annoying and problematic, but there's also being a consistent person who shows up for other people. And I'll give you another example. There's a guy recently I've been talking to who said he wanted to be my friend. This is true. Psychologist guy. And I'd like to be friends with him. And I emailed and he emailed back and we chatted back, but nothing's really happened. And I know that it would go away right now. But I've been thinking, I probably should write him because I've been thinking about him, and that's enough of a reason to write. Not because I expect him to write back or because I'm wondering how he will react, but just because I'm thinking about him. And if he writes me back again, then we're back into initiating the relationship. If I didn't write him, maybe he'd write me at a certain point. The only parameter we have are the parameters other people give us. If they say you're calling me a little too much, that's a parameter. If they say, I really never hear from you, that's a parameter. And guess what? You can ask. And it's different for everyone. I have friends who say, if I don't hear from you at least once or twice a week, I feel like you're out of touch. And I have other friends who say, I cannot hear from you for years. And we sit in a room together and it's like we never left. So, I think it's really individual, but ultimately, people are not going to show up for us as kind and loving as they may be unless we put ourselves out there. The world is far too distracting and busy for our line to get rung unless we're putting ourselves out there. That is just the way it is.
And I'm going to concur with that. I think a lot of it is early in recovery, I need to reach out because I still have a Post-it note. I have it stuck on my computer, ask for help. It's a good reminder to me that I need to be willing to ask for help. I need to be willing to connect with people just because I want to connect with people. And in the program that I went to, they always talked about the 500-pound phone. It was, that we had to pick up the phone, and it was so mortifying and so terrifying and so whatever to have to pick up the phone and go, hi, I need to connect to you. Now, that said, there are certain relationships, particularly if you have a sponsor, there may be a pattern where, your sponsor says, I want you to call daily at this time, or I want you to call every other day, or I'll call you on Tuesdays and Thursdays and you call me on whatever. Like, negotiate what you're looking for. And if it's a bigger support group, maybe it's you call, Rob on Monday, you call Tammy on Tuesday, whatever. However you're calling people, it's like, you get some sort of pattern. Then it's kind of like, well, I always talk to this person on Tuesday, so I'm gonna, so I would invite you not to make this such a big deal and just connect with people. Just connect. So now somebody does have a comment about showing up. So it's in the comments, but how do you know when to give up? Sometimes it seems that I have to force the showing up. Is there no one who cares enough about me to pursue the relationship? Why should I always have to do the work? I have felt that so often. So, and there are relationships. Well, it's a comment, but I was like, I have.
Well, I think there's two pieces to that.
So, yeah.
I think there's two pieces to that. Mm-hmm. I think one is if I was a place in life where I was reaching out a lot and not getting responded to, I probably would ask some of the warmer, kinder people I'd engaged with, like, gee, I didn't hear back from you. And I'm trying to figure out why I often don't hear back from people. I'm wondering, do I expect too much? Or I think it's okay to check that out. You're not in a marriage. You're not saying, do you love me or do you not? You're just saying, gee, I'm trying to figure this out. And I just think the world of asking questions. I really do. I heard something today, Tammy, like we heard it at a dinner we went to. The word was radical honesty or radical clarity or radical, it came out of someone's mouth. And I thought, yeah, I'm really annoying, but I'm really honest. Like I will just tell you what I'm thinking, and much to my detriment most of the time, but I find really as I age that people are more grateful than not that I've been clear and asked for what I wanted. And by the way, let me say something else about all this. What we are talking about in all of this, calling people, building relationships, how often should I depend on them? This is the exact issue that all of us struggle with in this room. If you are a sex or love addict, it's an issue of intimacy, an issue of, I need more connection in my life, but if people get too close, maybe I don't know if they're too close, but maybe I don't want them to be too close, but then I get lonely. And it's that whole intersection between when do I feel connected and really like I'm comfortably depending on others and they're depending on me, which is healthy, Or when do I feel like I'm annoying them or they're annoying? We really struggle with, and a lot of the ways that sex addicts or love addicts will bridge this discomfort is with sex or love. Because if I don't know how to connect with you and we start having sex, well, that's a way to connect. And then I can start connecting you through the sex. Or we can have this amazing fascination, love, intensity, and we can connect through that, but we really don't know each other very well. We're just sort of fascinated with each other. So this whole idea of how we find connection, how we build connection, how we get our needs met, how we know what our needs are, and how we take risks with letting people know what they are and try to trust that some of them will meet them in some ways. That is the work that the people in this room do. And I don't care whether you're trying to work out a marriage that's been broken or you've never known how to date. These are the issues about connection, trust, vulnerability, and the fear of being abandoned or not being worthy that drives so much of what our addictions are about.
Yeah, and I was thinking, there's that saying, I can be right or I can be happy. And I was thinking, applying it to this, it's like, I can sit here and wait for the phone to ring, or I can just reach out. I love what you're saying about your colleague or the other person. And you go, everybody gets busy, but that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about it. I'm just going to reach out. And what does it cost me? It costs me a little bit of vulnerability to be willing. But, at the end of the day, I bet that person's going to go, Rob, it's great to hear from you. You don't know until you try.
And I will say that, Sammy, people in our generation were forced to be more vulnerable because, texting someone is not as vulnerable as picking up the phone and hoping they'll answer. And that's a big deal now. I don't know about you, but I don't call people that much. And when I call them, I know it's a big deal. I'm really interrupting their Netflix flow or something, and that would bother me too. But it's just how life is. It's just where we are. But it's never too much for me to say, just thinking of you, happy emoji to somebody. And you know what? If they write back, that probably means they want to engage. It's really, really simple. And I guess there's another saying about this, which is don't give up before the miracle. Like keep reaching out and keep reaching out and keep reaching out, because this is ultimately what life is about, is our connections and the meaning we find in our relationships. It's not much about all the rest of the stuff you see around you. So this is the part you want to practice and get right. Go ahead, Tam, you got questions?
Next question. I have been in recovery for 9 months, and my boyfriend and I are having challenges in healing from my slips. My slips are with poppers and masturbation. He feels like he is the parent in our relationship and is getting really tired of managing my recovery. I'm in a 12-step program groups, and I have a sponsor. Do you have any advice on how I can play a better role in our relationship and recovery? I want us to make it through the tough time, but I don't know what else I can do besides the right thing to mend the situation.
Well, that's a really good, first of all, I would ask this person, do you feel like you're asking your partner to be a parent? Because people may say, oh, I feel like I'm your mom or your dad, but that doesn't mean that's what you're really wanting of them. So I would ask yourself that question, do I do things that I could handle myself? Do I have responsibilities and ways of caring for myself that I could take on or be more responsible for, but I don't or let slide? And he sees that, and then before you know it, I'm acting out. And that, in other words, am I not being fully adult in my life and leaving my partner feeling like they have to clean up the mess after me or before me? Because you could recognize that right now without asking your partner anything and become a more responsible adult in your recovery and in your life. And as far as how you handle slips, I don't know what the challenge is for you, whether your partner feels betrayed or your partner feels, or if it's that you just disappear with poppers and masturbation to the point where you're out of it for hours or days, or, I don't know what the issue is, but I do think that what is most effective for partners to do when you are struggling is for us to step away and take care of ourselves and be available if you need us. And, I don't think that it's his job to help you recover from your slip. I think it's his job to say, if you need me, I'm there. I'm going to go hang out with some friends. It's not that he's abandoning you or letting you down or even detaching from you. It's just he's detaching from the problem. In other words, call me when you're working on that. So, I don't think, if your spouse is tired of your slips, that's a different question than, is he tired of managing your recovery? If you find that your husband or wife is saying to you, have you been to a meeting lately? Are you still going to therapy? Are you still going to those 12-step meetings or stuff like that? That means you're not letting them know enough. Because addicts have a responsibility to let our spouses know how often we're going to meetings, how often we're being involved in recovery, so that you can rest assured that we're taking care of our side of the street. So I would wonder if he finds himself, or you find him bugging you about, have you been to meetings lately? Have you talked to your sponsor? Because if you're not doing those things and he is bugging you about it, why aren't you doing those things? Because that would make him feel better. And don't you want to make your spouse feel better? And it would help your recovery too. Tammy, you have something?
A couple thoughts on it. First of all, it says I'm in 12-step program groups and I have a sponsor, and I'm like, that's all great, but I'm thinking it's not quite enough level of care. That something is still preventing.
They need a
you from
couples
being able to-
counselor.
Yeah, well, or like a higher level of care. You know, like if you're constantly slipping, you know, you may need a higher level of care. I don't see anything that you're working with a qualified therapist, and I always use qualified therapists because there's a lot of therapists that aren't really familiar with this. The second thing I thought of was, and I've said this before on webinars and stuff, but like the slip doesn't happen when you take the, you know, when you're using the poppers and you're doing masturbation or whatever your acting out behavior is, doesn't really matter. But you know, it happens before. So when those uncomfortable feelings start and you're
and you start thinking about it.
Yes. So it might be hours in advance, or there may be stress at work, or there may be something. So I would invite you to start looking at intervening on the process, because while you've been hanging around and stuff for 9 months, I'm going to be pretty, like Rob says, I'm pretty honest. You know, you're not in recovery, you know, until you have a consistent pattern that you're building on. You know, you're hanging around and you're kind of skirting around it, but you know, you're still going to that acting out behavior, which kind of resets everything, both for you and for your partner. So I would invite you to engage in a higher level of care. But I mean, keep coming back. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad you're asking. So keep coming back to this. So next question.
Wait, I want to say one more thing.
Oh, sure.
I don't know whether you are telling your partner about your slips, but I do want to say that I am glad that you're telling him or her about your slips, because I don't want to leave my spouse, you know, as much as angry and upset as my spouse is going to be if I go see a sex worker, I would rather they knew than didn't know, because it's much worse for them to find out. So I do admire whatever's going on for you, that you are owning up to your slips. But I do wonder, and Tammy kind of said this, and I want to say this in another way too. If you're coming home all this, I noticed during a period in my life, I was coming home really stressed out. And you know, I just was saying that I'm so stressed out, and I was acting it, and I was all stressed out. But you know what? I wasn't doing anything about it. And you know who was having to struggle with the other end of my being stressed out? My spouse. So I didn't feel like handling my stress, except, well, guess what? That affects my relationship. So sort of like what Tammy said, maybe you might want to take a look before the slip to see how you're living your life in a way that, you know, is it peaceful? Is it assuring? Is it stable? Is it committed? Is it structured? Or are you kind of going wonko often enough that there's something else that you're not looking at? And that's what's making your partner crazy, is that you're not stable, period. Anyway, all good advice.
Okay. So the next one, I'm finally submitting to the idea of putting a filter on my devices. Alas, I know, I'm like, yay. I have always believed that having external control just means that I'm not in control. And I'm sorry. And I'm wondering if I ever will. Very discouraging thought. I'm sorry. I think the Seeking Integrity tends to have their guys use Net Nanny. Can you tell me why? What are the pros and cons? Do you have any, I don't know what.
I think that we should do a tech talk in recovery.
That's a great idea.
And Scott can join you, and because he's gone through all the platforms, and we'll put that, I'll tell you what, we will do a little webinar about that, and we'll post it, because I think that's something people are, what are the best filters? How do I use them?
Yes.
But I don't really, so let me just say something about filters and blockers for
Please
those,
do.
There's 22 people in the room. So let me just say how they work. They're basically two different functions. Blockers will block out any content that has to do with sex or violence. Like you check the box and that's it. It's kind of like if you have kids and you don't want them to ever see something. And I think that is a really good thing for young children, because I think blocking a young child, you know, up to 15, if you want, their access to really brutal content that you just don't want them seeing, understandable. But once a child is an adolescent, a late adolescent, and or with adults, I prefer what's called tracking software. And what tracking software does is it doesn't block me from anything, but it does send every keystroke on my phone or my tablet or device, everything I put in, it goes to in an email to my sponsor or my therapist or someone in my life on a regular basis. So every week or every day, someone in my life gets a tally of everywhere I went online, meaning that 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 when you use this kind of a filter, what you're doing is you're not taking away your chance that you might slip. You're not taking away the temptation, but what you're adding is accountability. So while I may be tempted, what doesn't stop me is that I can't get to it. What does stop me is the thought that someone else is going to see it and they're going to bring it up with me. And I have a commitment to them not to do it. And so I think for older teens who are like, you can't block my internet, and they're going to find their way around it anyway. Or for adults, I think if we want to monitor ourselves, it's better to have someone else involved. And what that's called is tracking software. That's called tracking software. So there's filtering and blocking. And I think that's great for young kids or someone who is so immobilized that they cannot get to the computer without going into this stuff. But eventually, I think tracking software is a good way to go.
Yes.
And no, I would not have your wife or husband tracking where you go online.
Correct.
That's not a good idea.
No. Okay, next one. I am still in early stages of recovery. My wife and I are committed to rebuilding our relationship of 30 plus years, but recently a couple of triggers have caused my wife to become upset and I don't know what to do or say.
Well, this person is not saying whether it's, so triggers have caused my wife to be upset. So a trigger might be, I'm going to make this up. Maybe he heard from an old girlfriend. Maybe he heard from an acting out partner. Maybe you encountered one of his exes. Something happened that triggered her into feeling unsafe or reminding her of past behavior. So I think, and listen, this is one of my, you're going to love that. Well, if you don't love me already, you're going to love me for this. You wrote, these triggers caused my wife to become upset and I don't know what to do or say. So I can tell you what to do. When your wife and you're in a fairly calm, comfortable moment and you have a moment to check in, you say, hey, can we chat about a few things? Take a moment. Great. Honey, I noticed lately that you've been upset and I think it's related to my triggers and I don't know what to do or say. In other words, I'm being overly dramatically pointing you back to your own question because why are you asking me? And I know I'm smart and I know things, but I want you to ask her. What are the things that bug you, honey? What are the things that get you going? When is that? How can I anticipate that? How can I help you with that? And it may even be that you can't. If that Victoria's Secret catalog comes in the mail, the one you haven't canceled that was really for you, she's going to be pissed. And it isn't because you did anything. It's because of what you did in the past. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I did write a book about this, I will say, called Out of the Doghouse, a step-by-step relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. And I did it because I often find that men kind of underplay or under-recognize the amount of pain that they cause their partners, that we cause our partners when we cheat. And so we think flowers and candy and aren't you going to get over it? It's been 3 weeks is going to work. And we don't really understand, especially in women, I believe, what betrayal feels like. And so I wrote a book for men to read, to cry, because I thought they would say, oh my God, this is what I have to do, all this stuff to make it up to her? Yeah, that's what you got to do. And she's been telling you that for 6 months. You're just not listening to her. So maybe you'll listen to me. Here's a book about how to really make it right with your spouse, because it's not candy and flowers. In fact, I'll tell you what recovers relationships. It's an equation that I've written. It's trust built over time is what's the recovery of your relation. It's building trust at the top, put a line through it over time. And there's nothing else. Another way to put it would be consistency over time. That your consistent actions, no big surprises, no dramas, lots of honesty, suiting up and showing up, just being a regular person. That's what calms our partners down. It's not any extraordinary act of, I went to treatment, I went to therapy, that helps. But ultimately, it's the day-to-day showing up for ourselves and our family in a way that makes them feel safe. I did want to say, Tammy, I do want to do self-promotion. We do run a treatment center, and it is called Seeking Integrity. In fact, if you look at Tammy's name, that's the name of our program. And we do all kinds of work there. We do 2-week programs for sex addicts. We do 3-week programs for drug and sex addicts, like chemsex, meth people. We do couples workshops. We do all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in treatment, please let us know. You can find us at seekingintegrity.com. And that is my mid-afternoon plug for us.
Well, and I want to actually share a couple other things because I'm not sure she would relate to this, but it's I mentioned at the beginning before everybody joined that we have drop-in groups, but one of them that we're looking to create is the Old Lady Posse, and they want it named that way. It's not me making this up, but and I have someone that I think is going to be willing to do that. So I would invite her to come, because it's going to be a group specifically for partners who have been with, in a relationship for a longer period of time, and they want to rebuild and they want to do that. And so it'll be a different kind of, I mean, I love the drop-in groups, and I would still encourage her to participate in those. And I hope you are participating in the men's drop-in groups. But for this particular one, it will be, other people in a similar situation. So I think she'll find support in that and be able to talk about those triggers and everything else.
And just to take it out of the naming it as old lady category, posse, we've had a number of women who are in longer term relationships. They've been married 20 years, 25 years, and they want to be in a group where somebody doesn't have young children, or somebody isn't just having an affair, or they're trying to work through a lifetime of betrayal one day at a time in a different way. And so I think we're going to be able to put, and if you're interested in that group, by the way, please write a note to Tammy at seekingintegrity.com. She'll put you on a list. And as she puts that list together, she'll, drop you a note and say, we're having it at Tuesdays or whatever it is.
Whatever it is. We haven't picked a day and time yet, but
We'll
I talked to somebody today and I think it's imminent now. So, okay, next question. After 10 years of marriage, I discovered my spouse has sexting, online porn addiction while I was 3 months pregnant with our second child while raising a 5-year-old with special needs. This behavior developed into a work affair, and I also later caught. The lies have continued beyond that, and now he has started a 12-step sex addiction program for the first time. Trust is beyond broken. When is enough enough? Now, looking back, I question our entire marriage. He looks like he is making positive strides on the outside while continuing with inappropriate behavior behind the scenes. Do I give 12 steps a chance to see if he can truly overcome 20 years of lies and inappropriate behavior?
Do you want to say anything, Tammy, to start?
I do. First of all, I just want you to know I'm sending you empathy. I know how painful that is. The betrayal trauma on top of, I had a special needs sister, and so I know what it takes to raise a, to have a family member that needs extra care. So my heart goes out to you from that standpoint. So honestly, Dr. Rob just talked about, a higher level of care. I'm going to plug a little bit too. One of the things, can you get there with?
Wait, can I just go? Can I?
Sure.
Be right back. Thank you.
So one of the things with a higher level of care, can you get there with a 12-step meeting? Absolutely. If you have 12-step meetings, you have a sponsor, you're ideally seeing a qualified therapist on top of that. Sorry. You're seeing a qualified therapist on top of that, and like doing everything right, it can be challenging to get there, and it can take a while, and that's challenging for the partner as well as the person in recovery. What in recovery, we're looking to have stop behaviors that we automatically did and don't have the coping mechanisms to handle life, without all of that. So one of the things with like the Seeking Integrity 14-day program is they come, and it's a 14-day intensive program that gives them a solid foundation of recovery on which to build. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't mean 20 years will be wiped out, but it does give a solid foundation. So, and I realize not everybody can do that, but honestly, if there's any way that is an opportunity, gosh, it sure gives, a really different perspective and a foundation on which to build. The other thing I really want to say too is I can so appreciate how you're grieving the loss of what you thought you had. And, you have this 10 years of marriage, and you're thinking you have this partner in this relationship that's, with you in raising your kids and doing all of life, and you're blindsided by, by this. So, like again, so I was talking about the drop-in groups for betrayed partners.
But I want to say something more about this question.
Well, just a moment, but so I would invite you to get support, including, this is all online. You can drop into the webinars, you can drop into the betrayed partner drop-in groups. That's exactly what we've created this stuff for. So I'm done. Please join.
Well, I heard, when I first, so I have a feeling. So you said after 10 years of marriage, I found out. And then you talked about being pregnant, and So let me just tell you what's typical for sex addicts. I've been working with sex and porn addicts for 25 years. And even before the internet, there was an internet, there were sex addicts. I promise you, I was one of them. And I've been doing this work on my own for 35 years and as a professional for 25. Most of the men I work with were out with a prostitute, with a sex worker in a massage parlor while their wife was giving birth, or they were having a baby, or she found out she was pregnant, or it is terrifying to a lot of men in ways that we do not admit. And I'm not saying that you should have empathy for him, because obviously that behavior is completely unacceptable. But I do understand from all the men I work with and what I hear, how it is that that happens. You know, he didn't I mean, from what you described, this isn't a man who decided to take on the challenge of having a special needs child and another child, and he wanted to escape that and let you do that. And he didn't want to handle that, didn't want to deal with that, and so he went into his own fantasy land and found a way to comfort himself, only he left you out. And so now you're discovering, wow, this is how he handled those painful situations. Maybe he never loved me at all. Maybe it never mattered. Maybe nothing ever mattered. Maybe this is the state of every spouse I've ever met in your state, which is, I don't know if anything we ever had was real. I don't know if anything we're going to have is real. And, you know, all of that. And all I can tell you is, if you feel there has been love there, and if you feel there is being an effort made, and if you feel you want to show up to see what's going to happen, and if you have children whose lives are going to be affected, then put your relationship in a safe harbor. Say, you know, for 6 months or a year, we're not going to divorce, we're not going to separate, as long as I'm doing this, he's doing that, we're doing that, whether it's workshops, or spend a year really diving into all this as a couple and individually, and then say, where are we? Because you have to understand that someone who's been lying to you for 15 years is not just going to suddenly, all of a sudden, be the most honest person in the world. He's still afraid that if you find that receipt, or look at that handkerchief, or smell that shirt, that you're going to know something. You know, that's where we're at in the beginning. So he's still spooked about everything you're going to find. It's early. He's still trying to figure all of it out. He's still trying to make it up to you while still being an asshole at the same time. What I do think is important, the other piece you said is, he said he's looking like he's making positive strides on the outside while continuing with inappropriate behavior behind the scenes. Okay, I don't know what that is, but that's not okay. Like, if it's being called out. If you say, well, he seems like he's going to program, but I think he's looking at porn at home, and then I think he's hanging out late and still chatting with those girls at the office, you need to call that out. One of the things that I think spouses really struggle with, two things. One is, I just don't think I'm right a lot of the time. You're right a lot of the time. We lie really well. 9 times out of 10, what you thought happened. It did. I'm sorry. We were trying to pull it over on you. We didn't. We're not that good. We think we are, but we're not. And the other thing is that we need to hear from you. I need to hear from my spouse what is upsetting them. You know, it may be that I left the computer on and left it in the same way as I used to leave the computer when I was looking at porn, but now I'm not. But to you, it feels like I am, because that's how I left the computer when I was looking at porn. If we don't talk about it, you may think I'm still looking at porn. You guys have to talk and talk and talk and talk. And you're going to have a lot of evenings where you don't talk to each other anymore, and you're not getting along. And this is hard work, and you guys have a lot of work to do. And what I would hope for you is that the relationship you've had, the parts of it that have meaning to you, which will still in time have meaning to you, I promise, your parenting, your children, the family you've created, that will all come back to you. If that has been meaningful enough for you with this person to want to stay, then I would put your relationship in a safe harbor and get yourself a therapist and a couples therapist and get to work.
Yeah, and I want to concur. I mean, there is hope. I know lots of relationships that
I
have
hope so.
found it. Well, no, I
Why
mean,
else are we doing this?
exactly. But yes, so it's always your choice, you know. But at the end of the day, there are lots of couples that do find a healing path and ultimately have a more honest and more connected relationship, because, you know, both people can show up. So. Okay, next question.
And please keep coming back to that person who
Yes.
just wrote. You're obviously in the new stages of this, and we want you here or wherever so
Yes.
that we can continue to support you.
Yes.
So glad you're here.
Yes. My kids are in the late teens. No, my kids who are in the late teens accidentally found out about my husband's love and sex addiction and multiple affairs. How should we handle this to minimize any possible damage?
I'm wondering about accidentally, wondering what they found. Fairs. I mean, this is a tough one because we support couples being as emotionally honest as possible with their kids, but not necessarily factually honest. Because for most couples, the idea that your kids are going to find out about your sex life, whether it was with each other or someone else, is just not a good idea. And so we really discourage telling kids about this. Tell them you're fighting, you're depressed, you're having problems. Make sure they know it's not their fault and move on. Don't let them know about your sex life. So this is a problem on a couple of levels. They've now they found out they've been traumatized by exposure to information about their parents' sex life. Okay, just take that in, okay? Your children have been traumatized by gaining information about their parents' sex life, which is clearly going to be upsetting to them. So forget even what the information was. There's two issues here. One, they had direct line into their father's sex life. And they knew how their mother was going to feel about it, right? Because they know what life is. So they were seeing that. They read dad's email. That is trauma for them. And they needed support for working through what it was like to see that, what it was like to think about it, to talk about it, to deal with it. That's a form of trauma. And then on top of that, what they found out was that dad is cheating. And that is another kind of trauma because now they're uncertain about their family life, about their parents, about what their dad is doing. They're angry at him. So I guess, I don't have lots and lots of training in working with kids. It's probably one of the reasons why we minimize some of that. But in truth, I would find a child and family therapist if you really, really want to help your kids and say, I think we've been through a trauma. I think we're going through traumatic experiences as a family. And I think we need some guidance because this is really tricky stuff. And, I don't know whether your kid is 13 or 14 or 19. I don't know what, I don't know whether it's a boy or a girl. I don't know the detail of what they found out. But if I did and we were working together, I could probably help guide your process with your children if I did marriage and family work with kids. So I think, and honestly, I don't even think it takes an expert in sex and relationship. It does take an expert in family work and children because your family's gone through trauma. And Tammy, it's so funny. You look like you're like doing that. It's so weird.
Well,
I know people are walking by. You're in a lobby. I get it. But I really would consider in this situation trying to get a family therapist. And by the way, go in as a couple. Don't bring your kids in. Go in as a couple and explain everything. And then say as a family, I'm not sure how we should. Look, it's perfectly fine for parents to make mistakes. And some mistakes like these, I think, are profound enough that you want to make sure they get handled really well now. So 5 years from now, your kid isn't struggling. So this is one I would invest in getting a family therapist for.
And I agree. And just letting your kids both know that it's not their fault and you both love them.
Certainly lots of that.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you're the wife of that person, look, I'm angry at your dad. I'm not happy with what he did is your space, but I'm not going to talk to you kids about that. I love your dad. I respect your dad. He has hurt me. I have to deal with that. That's where you're at. Not like, yeah, let me tell you how angry I am at him because now that because you don't want to pull them in further. So stand up and be the parent, whatever, wow, I'm sorry you heard that and you're going to have to deal with that, therapy, whatever, but you don't go into it further. I'm sorry you know that. I'd rather you didn't know that we were struggling in this way, but I'm glad we're struggling because it's not your fault and it is happening and, like that. But they don't need to learn any more details. They need to be backed away from this information.
So the next one, I am a love and sex addict in recovery and working hard. What is the best ways to control temptation from forming bad relationships outside my marriage?
All right, now, Tammy, I think that's a trick question.
Yeah, you've had a few tonight, so.
That's a trick. By the way, can I just tell you before you answer this, I found my shirts. I'm in a hotel. I sent my shirts out. Tiffany's never sent her shirts out ever in her life because I know she would never spend the money for hotel cleaning, but I had to. And so you know what? I found my shirts. The problem was they're in a box. Whoever expected shirts to be in a box?
So fabulous.
But it was $8 a shirt to have them cleaned, Tim. But I'm not going to be home for 2 weeks. So
I understand. Anyway. It's all good. So answer the trick question. You have your clean shirt.
No, I want you to answer it.
Oh.
And then I'll answer it.
Okay, what are the best ways to control temptation from forming bad relationships outside my marriage? I'm like, I don't form relationships with somebody you're tempted with.
Bingo!
number two, make sure that you're doing things in groups. If there's if there's somebody at work that's slightly tempting, make sure you're never alone with that person.
Or in your recovery program,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
in your life,
Wherever it is.
anywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
I do things in the rules of threes. If I'm going out with a couple of friends, there's three of us, and we can't all be sexually attracted to each other, because I know the world we live in. And that is simply for safety. And especially if I feel any attraction to someone or think something might be going on, I would never, even in my recovery today, I would never go out alone to dinner or lunch with someone I was attracted to who I knew was attracted to me. I wouldn't do it, because I don't try, that's like an alcoholic saying, let me just gargle this alcohol and spit it out. I'm not so sure I wouldn't swallow, and I don't want to gargle the alcohol because I don't want to swallow. So I'm just going to leave the glass on the table. And your job is to keep yourself out of every one of those situations as best you possibly can.
Yeah. Life is just a lot easier if I
and let me try something else.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you to do this directly, but I'll just say this to you. I would imagine if you came home to your husband or wife and you said, honey, I thought this person at work was so hot, and I just wonder if it'd be okay with you if I had an affair with them, because I just really want to go off and have an affair, and this guy's really hot and he's really new at work and I really want to be with him. Would that be okay with you? And I want you to be serious, because you know what? Your husband would fall out. Your wife would fall apart if you actually told somebody what you're really thinking, and you had to face them saying, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to go have this affair. I just want you to know. So be courageous enough to not do things on your own that you don't want your spouse to know about. We have a saying, we have a company, Tammy's part of it. It's called Seeking Integrity. There's a reason. It's because I have said, and I really appreciate the support of everyone I work with, that we agree that integrity is a hallmark to recovery. That integrity comes from the word integration, pulling different parts of yourself together. If I'm having an affair over there and I say I'm a great, honest AA sponsor over here and I'm married over there, and these are all three separate things, then I don't have integrity. Because I know every time I go home, my wife doesn't know I'm cheating. I know every time I'm supporting someone as a sponsor that if they knew what I was doing, they would think I was a creep. So you'll never get what you want when you can't believe in yourself. And we cannot believe in who we are unless we are fully integrated and unafraid of anyone who sees us doing anything. I wouldn't want you to see me in the shower this morning, but you know what? If you saw me showering, I would expect you to not be surprised that I take showers. I don't want there to be anything going on in my life that someone doesn't really know about. So, yeah. How's that for you?
That's good. So next question.
That's good. That's enough. Get rid of that one.
We got some. Should I respond to my husband's negative comments about my recovery efforts, such as you're going to a lot of meetings or you're completely involved in recovery, and many others? I've told him it's enough of a struggle for me to stay sober when I am focusing on recovery. I can't imagine if I wasn't.
Well, good for you that you're focused on recovery. And I always think that when we think we can't handle one more thing, we get thrown an opening. And here's one for you. This is not about how many meetings you're going to. Okay, your husband is still feeling jealous, anxious, fearful. He's doing what every wife does, which is, well, you're not going to any meetings when you don't go to a meeting. And then you go to a meeting, well, you're going to a lot of meetings. It doesn't really matter what you do. He's upset, and he's going to be upset. And so I think that what the brave and noble thing for you to do is to understand that if you betray your marriage or committed relationship, that he's going to be upset for a really long time, maybe a year or longer. And he's not going to be thrilled that you're going to meetings because it reminds him that you're cheating on him. You're cheated on him. And when he thinks about you're cheating on him and he doesn't see you at a meeting, he's going to be pissed that you're not at one. But it isn't about whether you're at the meeting or not. It's that you cheated on him. So this is a constant reminder to him that you betrayed him every time you go to a meeting. Every time you call a sponsor, you remind your husband that you cheated on him. So this is not just your struggle to focus on recovery. You also need to focus on your husband and let him know how sorry you are as often as you can, that he is having to see you. I wish that you weren't having to see me go to meetings. I really do. I wish that I didn't have this issue that we are now having to go through. And I am so sorry that you can anticipate it. I'm so sorry. I bet every time I go out to a meeting, you're thinking, yeah, she could be with me, but she's out at those stupid meetings. And I bet every time I don't go to a meeting, you're thinking, You don't trust me, why? I bet you can anticipate all that for him and understand and have empathy for all that for him. Because I think addicts can do more than just focus on our own recovery. I think you can also focus on the recovery of your relationship by simply letting your spouse know that you acknowledge that this is hard. And the more that you acknowledge that this is hard, the less he'll have to be cranky and sarcastic with you because he wants to remind you that this is hard. You can get ahead of him and say, hey, I'm sorry this is difficult. I'm sorry we're going through this. I am sorry I ever hurt you. And you can never say that enough, I don't think.
Well, and I was thinking, is there something that you could do, like say, why don't you meet me after the meeting? We'll go out for a bite to eat or something. I don't know. I mean, is there a way to have it not be, it's just about me, but like, I'm going to go to my meeting. I'm in a good place then. Let's go out for a bite or a cup of coffee or whatever. I don't know. I like what you're saying, that we can focus on us too. I 100% needed to focus on my recovery. I needed to do all of that, but I was really connected with other people. I was single at the time when I first got sober, so I was not in that position. But I can only imagine going like, you're still not available.
Feeling pulled in every direction.
Yeah. So I think there's got to be ways where you're taking care of your recovery, but like you said, can be doing some things to support him too. So. Okay, so the next two are comments. So this is not a question, it's a comment about reaching out, not urgent. I appreciate that. I have been reaching out since I moved 18 months ago so much and being so friggin' rejected. I have taken a step back. I needed to regroup and learn to reach out differently. I love that. You took in data and you looked at it. I have turned to other things. College class, music, grandbaby, etc., putting my really good love and tender heart and attention in places that feel nurturing and self-respect building. Your groups and in the room is really helping me feel that there exist caring people out there, and I only need probably 1 or 2 friends, and I'm having faith and trust for today. I'm doing so much better. I know how to reach out. I was frantic about it. Thanks so much. I did find my married lady posse online. I did. Awesome. And then it says, thanks, Tammy. I can't wait for the old lady posse group beginning. I've been more hopeful than I've been married 40 years. He left over a year ago because of your site and you both. I've been more hopeful than I felt in years, not only about my marriage, but all of the relationships for the rest of my life. Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so then the final one is, I was about to tell my girlfriend that I have a sex porn addiction, yet I was afraid she would never look at me the same way.
Wait.
What?
I wanted to say something about the last
Oh,
question.
all right, thank you.
But do you still have it?
Yeah, go to answered. If you look up answered.
Oh,
so.
I can look up answered.
Okay. Yeah.
There actually was something I thought was really important there. Oh yeah. So just to say something, it's really, this is what you said about this person. So this is a person who said, I was reaching out online and going to some, it didn't work for me. And then I started investing in things. And I really love the way you said this. I started putting myself into I started putting good love and tender heart and attention, I'm assuming you meant yours, into places where I feel nurturing and self-respect building. College classes, music. So guess what? This is where the friends are going to show up. And I say that because I think that may be obvious to some of us, but for those of us sitting and saying, well, I know you keep saying I need to connect, I need to meet people, I need to get a posse, I need to grow. How do I do that? Well, go out in the world and take a class, join a choir, go to a 12-step meeting, go hiking. I mean, the things you like to do in the world, somebody else does too. And even if I wouldn't suggest this if you're married and you're going to go join a bunch of other mixed gender people, but for the single folks, certainly, start doing the things you enjoy doing. And that's where you can find other people that enjoy doing the things you like to do. And that's how it happens.
Okay. So last question. I was about to tell my girlfriend that I have a sex porn addiction, yet I was afraid she would never look at me the same way and always question about my actions. I'm trying to recover from addictions alone. Ooh. I want to tell her when I feel confident about my recovering process. I know I should be honest, but I'm too scared. What should I do?
You want to start?
Yes, because I'm about bursting. Don't do it on your own. Don't do it on your own. When I'm trying to recover from addiction alone, how I got into my addiction is alone. That's how my best thinking got me into the mess I got myself into. So the only way I got out of that was by all the people that taught me how to live life differently, that helped give me the tools. And we've talked about it earlier tonight. It's about attachment. It's about connecting with other people. It's about having a real life. Yeah.
And growing.
Yeah. So
I really think that a lot of addicts and well, I don't know about partners, but certainly addicts, we are very skilled in life with certain areas, but kind of not so skilled in other. I mean, we might be, able to engage people or be fun or be good at work, but when it really gets to asking for help for ourselves, not so good. Well, I could run a whole room full of people and take care of everybody and manage a whole company, but I couldn't ask for somebody to help me. And that is not only, I mean, Tammy's right. That is what we teach in the 12-step meetings in the rooms, is ask for help and reach out. But it's more than that. It's why we ask people to do it, is because that's where the healing is. It's in the connections. It's in learning to trust people, learning they're going to be there for me. And you know what? If somebody in one of my groups doesn't have the time to call me, I don't say to myself, oh my God, I'm such a jerk, they don't care. I just go to the next person and say, would you like to chat? And that's the great thing about, about putting ourselves out there in not so serious ways, is we can try out different people in different situations and practice intimacy. It doesn't have to be, and you know what? I hope that if you're single and watching the show tonight and you're thinking about dating, I don't want you to think about dating unless you've got at least 2 or 3 really good friends. Because if you do not know how to be a good friend, forget dating. Forget a long-term relationship. Forget it. Because you got to know how to be a friend if you're going to have a long-term partner. Sex and passion ain't enough. So the relationships are the key to all of it. And our working on them, being more open, more honest, more vulnerable, is always the right ticket. Even if sometimes people wish we weren't being as open or as vulnerable, it's really the best thing for us to be doing. We addicts in particular need to lean on the side of being overly honest and overly direct and showing up and asking more often for help, because of how little we really natively do that.
And as far as telling her, first of all, you don't have, and this is my opinion, like a really solid foundation. You aren't going to be able to say, and here's what I do for my recovery. It's just like, well, I'm trying to do this on my own. I'm like hanging in there, white knuckling it, hanging in. So that's a little bit of a challenge. The second thing is, if I'm in a I am in a relationship, and if my husband doesn't really, if I held secrets from him, then it would be, he's only going to like me or love me, but he doesn't really know me. And if he really did know me, he's not going to like or love me. So
right, you can judge yourself if you have secrets.
Yes, you're not being your true and authentic self. And if we want to be in a loving relationship, it's about being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to share who we truly are, because we want to be connected on that level.
But I do want to add to what Tammy's saying, and I think it is important. If I had cancer, I'd probably go to my partner right away and say, I have cancer and I don't know what to do, and we would figure it out. But in this case, you have a problem, and you're going to need support, and that you're going to need a way out. And believe me, you're not going to find it by yourself. If you think of your girlfriend, what do you think would be more comfortable for her to hear? I've got this problem. Or I've got this problem, but I've met these people and we've been talking about it. I've been working on it. I've been going to these meetings. Which one do you think would go over better? So why wait? Get to work, build some support for yourself. And when she says, screw you, and walks out, or whatever she's going to do with this information, you're not alone. You have people around you to help you deal with it and help you understand how to come back to her and make it right. So you have every reason to reach out to other people. Get to work. Tammy, thank you for your time in that lobby, wherever you are.
Yeah. And I will see you
next. We'll be back online in our normal places.
But I will see you in St. Louis next.
I will see you in St. Louis. We're going to yet another conference. It's conference season, so we're running around the country.
Okay. Thanks,
if you want more information from us, I'm Rob at seekingintegrity.com. Tammy is Tammy at seekingintegrity.com. She'll probably write you that. So
TAMI, I'm a 4-letter word, so TAMI.
You are, and a force of nature. Have a nice evening, everybody. We are spreading the gospel wherever we go. We're doing the good work.
There you go.
You guys be well. Have a good night.